In the 12th century, Central Asia was a region defined by intense geopolitical rivalry. Just generations before the Mongol conquests would sweep across the map, competing powers like the Khwarezm Shahs and the Ghurids vied for total dominance, creating a fractured but highly funded intellectual landscape. Fakhr al-Din al-Rāzī navigated this volatility to secure immense wealth and status. Operating under the patronage of the Ghurid court, he became a central figure in a political world that projected its power through monumental architecture and rigorous scholarship. The intellectual world he inherited was split between two massive factions. The first was Falsafa, the highly structured Hellenistic philosophical tradition heavily defined by the writings of Avicenna. Falsafa relied on Greek logical systems to argue for concepts like the eternal emanation of the universe. Opposing this was Kalam, the orthodox, rationalist Islamic theology championed by the Asharite school. Kalam used intense debate to defend the tenets of Islamic revelation against what it saw as the theological errors of the philosophers. Al-Rāzī refused to act as a strict partisan for either side. Though trained as an Asharite theologian, he positioned himself as an independent examiner, perfectly willing to dismantle the arguments of both his allies and his philosophical rivals. By rejecting ideological loyalty, he gained the freedom to restructure the entire curriculum of post-classical Islamic sciences, building a new system out of the surviving pieces of both traditions. His primary mechanism for this restructuring was the dialectical procedure. This method relies on exhaustively testing every conceivable argument for and against a specific topic before arriving at a conclusion. He applied this method with extreme rigor. Al-Rāzī would routinely construct, steelman, and then destroy hypothetical philosophical positions, even if no actual historical school had ever adopted them. To understand how this dialectical engine operated, we will observe it actively dismantling and rebuilding three core scientific domains: physics, metaphysics, and psychology. His ultimate objective was not destructive skepticism. He isolated the strongest proofs from opposing systems to build a single, unified matrix of general metaphysics. In the domain of physics, the central medieval dispute concerned the basic structure of matter. Is the fabric of the universe a continuous whole, or is it built from discrete, indivisible units? Avicenna maintained the Aristotelian position known as continuism. Continuism is the theory that any physical body, no matter how small, can theoretically be divided into smaller subparts infinitely. This diagram illustrates Al-Rāzī's mathematical counterproof against infinite physical divisibility. If continuism is true, a single mustard seed possesses infinite parts and could theoretically be stretched to coincide with the spatial dimensions of the entire universe. Because stretching a tiny seed to the size of the cosmos is a physical absurdity, Al-Rāzī reasoned that the underlying premise of infinite mathematical divisibility in real-world objects must be false. He replaced this with his own geometric atomism. This theory argues that the universe is built of indivisible points, acting more like geometric coordinates than extended physical blocks. To prove reality is discrete, consider a perfect sphere resting on a flat plane, making contact at exactly one indivisible point. As it rolls, the contact doesn't blur continuously. Instead, one distinct point of contact ceases, and the next discrete point begins. The experiment proves that movement, and therefore physical reality itself, operates on a discrete, atomic level rather than a continuous one. By proving the existence of discrete, indivisible atoms, Al-Rāzī forces the acceptance of a true void, empty space that exists independently of bodies. This upended traditional Aristotelian physics, which rejected the possibility of a vacuum entirely. Shifting to metaphysics, Al-Rāzī applied this same analytical rigor to a central theological paradox. How can a changeless God know a dynamic, constantly changing world? The problem hinges on the concept of the necessary being. A necessary being is an entity whose essence implies its own existence, requiring no external cause, and which must remain absolutely immutable in all respects. The conflict arises with particular knowledge. If God tracks a changing event in real time, such as a person walking from one town to another, God's internal state of knowledge must change to reflect that new reality. But any internal change violates immutability. Avicenna attempted to solve this by claiming God only knows universal laws, not individual particulars. His logic was based on a theory of cognition called representationalism. This animation illustrates representationalism, a system where cognition requires a literal imprint, or a copy of the observed object, to be stamped directly into the observer's mind. Rāzī identified the flaw here. Receiving a mental imprint is a literal alteration of the mind. If God's cognition operates this way, he changes with every new observation, and therefore cannot be the necessary being. To fix this, Rāzī introduced the relational state of cognition. Knowledge is an active connection, not an internal copy. As the square moves along the timeline, the solid circle representing the observer remains entirely motionless. Only the angle of the connecting vector line shifts. Because a changing relationship is external, it does not alter the underlying essence of the entities involved. The observer's core nature remains untouched. Through relational cognition, Rāzī resolves the paradox. He proves that God can possess absolute, real-time knowledge of every particular event in a deterministic universe, without ever compromising his unchanging essence. Finally, in the domain of psychology, Rāzī tackled the medieval debate over the structural architecture of the mind. This visual represents Aristotelian faculty psychology, the dominant theory which compartmentalized the human soul into distinct, isolated powers, separating physical senses from higher reasoning. Rāzī dismantled this compartmentalization using the paradox of the hybrid judgment with a simple drop of honey. When a person examines and eats it, the faculty of vision registers the color white, and the faculty of taste registers sweet. He then posed a critical question. If these faculties are strictly isolated, what mechanism outputs the combined judgment that this honey is white and sweet? His conclusion was absolute. The soul itself must be an indivisible unity, processing all inputs as a single subject. This unified model of the soul carried consequences for the categorization of living beings, specifically regarding the biological divide between humans and animals. By proving that the soul acts as a single entity capable of grasping both physical particulars and abstract universals, Rāzī dismantled the hard barrier separating species. He argued that if humans possess this unified intellect, we must grant continuous rationality and self-awareness to non-human animals as well. Rāzī's work across these three sciences demonstrates a thorough, systematic dismantling. He replaced continuous physics with void geometry, swapped representationalism for relational cognition, and collapsed faculty psychology into a single, unified soul. This relentless destruction of established definitions triggered a historical backlash. Because he was so adept at tearing down accepted theories, later scholars frequently accused him of falling into global skepticism. He employed these exhaustive dialectics as a mechanism to reach bedrock certainty in a world saturated with paradoxical arguments. His ultimate achievement was surgical. He successfully stripped the perceived ideological heresy away from Avicennan philosophy, while aggressively extracting its highest standards of logical proof. He then integrated those exacting logical standards directly into orthodox Asharite theology, forging a new, mathematically rigorous system of Islamic thought that would dominate the centuries to follow. Fakhr al-Din al-Rāzī acted as the ultimate intellectual arbiter, demonstrating that the highest logical standards and the core of Islamic theology could inhabit a single coherent reality.